Hello and welcome back to the Packet Shed. These videos are going to be around virtual systems. Might branch it into two videos because there's quite a lot to cover. But around virtual systems, I want to look at what they are and do some tests on how we can route traffic from one virtual system to another. But more importantly, I want to look at virtual system supported what we can do from Strata Cloud Manager in regard to virtual systems. But before we get to Strata Cloud Manager and virtual systems, we want to just cover off exactly what a virtual system is, some use cases. A lot of the time, I see people using virtual systems when they don't actually need them. So cover off good use cases for them, and do some kind of prelim tests on the different mechanisms of passing traffic from one VSYS to the other. So yeah, hopefully you find the content useful. So what is a virtual system or a VSYS? Well, it's almost like say splitting up a firewall into multiple different logical smaller versions of it. So can you imagine I had a large firewall and I had four customers, and I wanted to completely isolate the not just the traffic from those customers but also the management access. So I wanted each customer to be able to log on to this firewall and create their own security policies. I could achieve that using a virtual system on a per customer basis. So if when we need that administrative boundary, a virtual system can fit the bill quite nicely. But the underlying hardware is the same. So the management plane, the data plane, that's kind of powering each of those four different customers' traffic will be still the same. But just the access to it can be controlled much more granularly when we have those in a virtual system. Now, if we don't need that virtual system, so some kind of use cases, then let's look at the use cases. So managed service providers, yeah, absolutely. If they have multiple customers and they want to allow each customer access to their fire to their create security policies, maybe managed service providers can do that. But if it's a full managed service, and they only want to isolate different customers' traffic, that can be achieved and with zones and with designated virtual routers. So again, you would only need the virtual system here if you wanted to allow administrative access on a per customer basis, while isolating the what you could see for the other customers. Large enterprises. So if I have very large enterprise and I have different corporate entities within that, where I want those different corporate entities to be able to manage different aspects of their traffic, I could achieve that using virtual systems. But if it's managed at a group level, and I only want to segment the traffic, I can achieve that again using virtual routers and zones. For regulatory compliance, then, so I know in organizations like where patient data is being transacted, there may be requirements to have patient data be transacted over a separate firewall than say a guest Wi-Fi or some payment terminal traffic that might be running through a hospital network. But um, but while we can create that administrative boundary and segment them by virtual system, it is still effectively running on the same underlying hardware, management plane and data plane. So yes, it has that administrative boundary, but again, this could be achieved using virtual routers and zones. Whether it meets your regulatory compliance, you would have to check with your compliance team. So some components of virtual systems, just to run through them. Again, that administrative access, the administrative boundary is the number one on the list of the components. You've policies, objects on a per virtual system basis. User ID, cert management, your server profiles, they can be on all on a per virtual system basis as well. Logging and reporting, of course, you can see logs for VSYS 1 or logs for VSYS 2, and we'll see that when we're running some tests later on. Routing, so I have the routing and the kind of asterisks there. So even though you can have virtual routers on a per VSYS basis, if you are an admin on a per VSYS basis, you're not going to be able to access the virtual router, because even though it's designated to a particular VSYS, it is seen as a device level, a device level configurable item, and it could impact other areas of the or traffic flows on the device. So in order to edit the virtual router, even if it's on a per VSYS basis, you would have to be a super admin to the whole firewall. Okay. Now, what we can also have shared objects for our VSYS as well. So, from an efficiency point of view, you might want to have like a shared, list, global external dynamic lists, or shared URL objects, security profile groups. You can share them, or you can be granular and have them on a per VSYS basis. Okay, so the choice is up to the administrator basically. Now, what platforms support virtual systems? So there is support there for the PA4 400 series for virtual systems. Certain devices now, not all the devices on the PA400 series support them. VM series is also supporting virtual systems now. They are on a 4 CPU or higher basis, for vCPU or higher basis. PA500s, certain PA500s have support for VSYSs, and the 7000 and the 7500 they definitely 100% support virtual systems, and so on and so forth. So there's support. They're the kind of firewalls that support VSYSs at the moment. So when we are thinking about virtual systems, a lot of the time we want to end up routing traffic from one VSYS to the other. So there's going to be some different options around that. One of the first things we have to think about is whether we're going to use a dedicated logical router or a shared logical router. So if you're using a dedicated logical router and you want to route traffic from one VSYS to the other, you would have to have a route to the next hop being the next logical router, and you would have to have a return route back as well. In addition, you would have to make these you would have to create an external zone and make the virtual systems visible to each other. Now, with a shared logical router, you don't have to do the return routes or the kind of the routes to the other VSYS and the return routes, but you would still have to do the external zones. Okay. Now we're going to look at a couple of scenarios, and I'm going to go through the configuration and what they look like. The first scenario we're going to look at is routing traffic out of the firewall and into the other virtual system. So it's going to if I use the blue for a moment, so I have traffic that's going to originate in LAN 1, and it's going to come out, egress out WAN 1 interface, and it's going to ingress in WAN 2 interface, and then from WAN 2 it's going to go to DMZ2 with by means of a destination NAT policy. Okay, so I'll just get rid of that. The next scenario we're going to look at then is well, I want the traffic to stay on the firewall, and I want to route traffic again from LAN 1 over to LAN DMZ2. Okay, so there's going to be a web server in DMZ2, and I'm going to be querying it and making sure the page loads, and also running some speed tests by uploading a file across these different scenarios. But in order to do this, I need to have this external zone, a special type of zone on when it comes to virtual systems, and we're going to pass the traffic off between the virtual systems internally on the firewall. And the last scenario we're going to look at is this shared gateway mechanism. Again, and where previously we had dedicated virtual routers, logical routers, now we're going to have everything within a shared logical router, and the gateway or the egress point that the both virtual systems use to talk to the outside world is going to be a shared gateway. Okay, some considerations when we are looking at virtual systems. Inter-VSYS traffic, that's the kind of scenario 2 and 3 that remains on the firewall, and the shared gateway doesn't get offloaded. So offloaded traffic is a resource saving mechanism when traffic doesn't need to be scanned, and it's defined, it's worked out that it doesn't need to be scanned, further scanning on it. It can be sent to an offloading chip effectively, and it's much more resource friendly on the firewall as the traffic is traversing it. So Inter-VSYS traffic and shared gateway traffic has the capacity to increase the resource usage and on the firewall. Inter-VSYS traffic that does leave the firewall can get offloaded. So even though it will kind of effectively, it's going to leave the firewall and come back in, be scanned twice in essence, it can be offloaded, and it's seen as a much more resource efficient way of processing this traffic for high volume environments. External zones and share gateways are configurable on PanOS and Panorama. So we will be looking at Strata Cloud Manager managed virtual systems later on, but just as a kind of from the get go, we can create these external zones and shared gateways from Strata Cloud Manager. We could only route traffic from one VSYS to another using the effectively scenario 1, where the traffic's leaving the firewall and coming back in. So we have a PA440 here. First thing before we go ahead and enable the virtual system would be to check the license. But we can see the checkboxes there for multi-VSYS system capability. So have we license on this one? And you can see there's the additional one VSYS license there. So we'll go ahead and enable the virtual system checkbox now. And that will trigger commit. So if you're switching, they should have left it on a little bit longer, but yeah, it just says it's going to trigger a commit at the back end. The screen's going to flash as well. There's a menu options going to appear in a moment as well. That's for the shared gateway and for the virtual system. So that's not there by default. It only comes when we enable that checkbox. There is still a commit pending, so just kind of let that commit go through. And what have we got then in these menus? Well, we can go in here and create another virtual system. So I'm going to kind of call it 2, give it a name. I want decrypted content forwarded to things like the advanced wildfire. So we need to have that checkbox enabled. There's a series of other options in here around resource limits. So how much resources do we want to give virtual system 2 versus virtual system 1? If we leave it blank, it just uses whatever's available. And once we have created our other virtual system, we can now start creating virtual system admins. So I'll just create one in here. I'll create another one in a few minutes as well. But for virtual system 1, I create a admin, and we log in a few moments and just see what this user can see. I'll create some I'll create some logical routers. So LR1 is going to be for virtual system 1. and LR2 is going to be for VSYS 2. So after you create the virtual the logical router, you can go in and just select it on that menu. And the same for here. Now we could have just one virtual logical router for both virtual systems, or you can have you can separate them out like this. Within the zones, we'll create the zones as we're doing the interfaces. So blank interface set up here. Just show an example of us creating an interface, and we'll zoom it on. So select the logical router. Virtual system 1 is selected here. We've no zones configured, so I'm going to create some zones. 1-1 for VSYS 1, and 1-2 will be VSYS 2. Also include the log setting. If you're doing zone protection profiles without a log setting, the logs don't get forwarded. So yeah, make sure you have one in there. I'm just going to set this to DHCP client. Now later on, when I do some Inter-VSYS traffic, and I want inbound NAT from Ethernet 1 to Ethernet 4, which is going to be the WAN interface of VSYS 2. I do have to change it from a DHCP to a static, but we'll cover that later on. But for now, I'm just selecting same as I did for the other interface, but I'm just creating a WAN interface for VSYS 2 effectively. I'm making sure VSYS 2 is selected there. Set it for DHCP for the moment. I do, like I say, come back and change that. And following on that process, I do create some other interfaces that'll magically appear in a few moments. And there they are. So we'll keep going on, and I just show the logical routers now has those extra interfaces included in them. Underneath the device virtual systems, we can see those LR1 and LR2 logical routers. So happy enough with that. On the administrators there, I did create another admin VSYS 2. So you have your VSYS 1 admin and VSYS 2 admin. Go ahead and commit those changes. And once that's committed, just do a quick check around again. So all those interfaces are down. I'll log out. And I'm going to just test the two admins that I've created. So I'm going to log out and log in as the VSYS 1 admin. Log in, and you can see what they can see then. So they don't have the full view of the network tab. They can't see the logical router. So it has to be super admin to see the logical router. So a virtual system admin can only see stuff pertinent to their kind of security policies. Really, they can't affect anything on the device level, and a logical router is defined as something at the device level, even if it's within their VSYS. Within the device setup, normally again this is all administrator device level settings. You see the gear cog is missing on a lot of these options, so it won't let them do anything that will affect the whole device. They don't have as many options on the left hand side there as they would if they were super admin either, being a VSYS admin. But what can they do? Well, they can go into their virtual system, as it were, and they can create a security policy. So I'll just create two security policies in here just to show that. One from the LAN to the WAN. And we'll also do one from the DMZ in a moment. We've nothing configured here, so just create one called default. I'll select the kind of default antivirus and vulnerability, spyware, URL filtering, file blocking, and wildfire profiles. So it's just a quick just to show that we can create a policy. And I'm going to create another one now in a moment for the DMZ outbound. So just prefix these names. Of course, you can clone this security policy. I'm just going to change the name and the source zone. And we do need an outbound NAT policy for these flows of traffic as well. So for VSYS1, we'll do an outbound NAT policy. LAN DMZ. We're going to do pretty much the exact same on the virtual system too. But there you can only see the VSYS1 interfaces. Now, translated packet, because the Ethernet 1 is set as, which is the WAN 1 link, is set as DHCP, we can leave the IP address as none. We don't need a static route because the static route is pulled in on the DHCP as well. So should be good at that. So I'll go ahead and commit that to VSYS1. And yeah, I can check now. So what I'm doing here is adding a DHCP server to LAN 1, sorry, DMZ1 on both virtual systems. So LAN 1 and LAN 2 and DMZ1 and DMZ2. Just so for testing, when I plug into the interface, it gets an IP address. And that's how we do the DHCP server for an interface. We'll fast forward it on, just give it a kind of default DNS for the moment. Fast forward it on, I'll create in DHCP interfaces for all 4 interfaces. That's what it looks like there. And then on the actual interfaces themselves, you can see if you enable the column, you can see what services is enabled on these interfaces. Features even, sorry, and that's the symbol for DHCP server. So that's all looking good now. I can kind of start testing traffic. You know, I've done the same security policy and NAT policy on VSYS2 as well, and I've committed that. So it should be good to start plugging in to these interfaces and generating some traffic, which I'm doing here. I can show traffic from the DMZ going out to the WAN 1. And I'm logged in as a super user now again. But VSYS2, because I've done that similar policy and NAT policy as I have on VSYS1, you'll see traffic come through here now in a moment. And there you see traffic from the LAN going over VSYS2. Cool. Okay. So I think that's plenty enough for one video. But you know what we covered on this, we discussed what a virtual system is and some common use cases we can use them for, and we also looked at how we can enable them on PAN-OS firewalls as well. So in the next video, we're going to look at how we can, in detail, how we can configure routing traffic from one virtual system to the other, and also do some tests and speed tests on the different options for that Inter-VSYS traffic. Cheers.